Thank you very much, Karen, for the wonderful introduction, and I also want to thank the Santa Barbara Navy League for having us here and hosting this event and having all of you here today. So I appreciate it very much. And for me, of course, it's nice to be here, even though I'm traveling up and down the state to talk about our State of the State address and what we talked about there, and also our budget that we presented on January 10th. But it's nice to come here because I always come up here to Santa Barbara, vacation a little bit, and my wife loves this spot, and so when we ever want to get away for a nice romantic weekend, we come up here to Santa Barbara. So, which we're going to do this weekend also, as a matter of fact. Yeah, absolutely. So I've been traveling up and down the state since we've done the budget presentation, and basically to talk about all the important things that we are facing. But one of the things that is extremely important this year is that we have a budget problem, and that is something that happens in the state of California, and I think in many other states probably, but mostly in California, every 5 years or so. We get into this thing where we have a budget problem, and it's always because of the same problem, the same reason, and that is because we have a system in place that doesn't work. It's a broken system, and governors, if it's Democratic governors or Republican governors, everyone has been faced with that same problem. And of course, the bad situation is that it takes everyone on a roller coaster ride. So that, when we have our revenues going up, then we spend it all, and when the revenues flatten out, then all of a sudden we don't have enough money for all of those programs that need money. And so this year we have the same situation again. This year our anticipated revenues are supposed to be $101 billion, meaning this fiscal year, 2007-2008. And our revenues now are only going to be $96 billion. So we're about $4.6 billion short of those revenues. The only problem is that while our revenues are now flat, we have only an increase of 1% revenues rather than the 5% we anticipated. The spending formulas that we have in our state require us to spend and to increase spending by 7.3%. So you have flat revenues, but the spending formulas that I cannot control, and only when we pass laws can they be controlled, increase by 7.3%. So that means that we have been watching now for several months that we are spending, that the state spends $400 to $600 million more than we are taking in, and we can do nothing about it. So now we have to do mid-year cuts, which means the legislators have to get together, and with a 2/3 vote, you then can make certain cuts. So we have made recommendations of those cuts. But the problem is if we don't make those cuts now, but next year it gets even worse. This fiscal year we have a $3.3 billion hole, which is doable. But if we don't do anything, it will go up to $14.5 billion by the end of next fiscal year. That means that by the year 2009, in June, end of June, we will be at $14.5 billion. So this is why I have recommended in my budget to make 10% cuts all across the board in order to really be fiscally responsible and only spend the money that we have. Because right now we are spending more than we have, and that's irresponsible. No one can live under those circumstances. Everyone will get bankrupt. Companies cannot operate this way. Families cannot operate this way. Now, I've brought some charts here with me so you can see a little bit about what the problem is. We have here, the green line is the revenue line. And the yellow line here is the spending line. So as you can see, those two are not matched up. They're totally independent. So no matter what the revenues are, the state is required to spend a certain amount of money. This is what got us into trouble in the late 90s, early 2000s. Then we had a budget, a deficit for billions of dollars every year, and this is why when I took over, we had a $16.5 billion structural deficit. Then we tried to bring the lines together here, and also it was easy because the economy was growing very fast. And now the revenues are leveling off, so instead of now keeping this line with the revenues, we are required to spend more, and it goes out of control, the spending. So this is why I said, let us bring this line down, and I recommended 10% cuts across the board because it's the fiscally responsible thing to do. But it is unnecessary because we never should be ever cutting anything. if we have a budget system in place that really works. Like, for instance, if we would have had the last 10 years the budget system in place that I'm recommending, it would have been like this. The two lines are together, as you can see here. The spending line and the revenue line is together. Not perfectly together, but at least we wouldn't have to go and suspend education and go and suspend certain programs and make 10% cuts. What we're doing right now with our budget system is we are basically sending people on a roller coaster ride. Every year when we do the budget, it's a roller coaster ride where people of California have to hold on for dear life. And I say this is no way to do it. Now, we have, of course, known this ahead of time. This is why when I came into office in 2003, I made recommendations and we introduced a bill to make those changes, to make changes in the budget system. But it was voted down because they didn't like to be fiscally disciplined in Sacramento. It was voted down, and then we went back again in 2005 and we asked the people through the special election to go and again and vote for a budget system. That was not successful. So now we're back a third time. I think that this year it may work because the people of California see they don't want to be taken on this roller coaster ride, and the legislators themselves see that this has been a huge problem for our state, and not only because we have to make those cuts, but also the financial community is looking at California like that we are operating like a joke, because they're looking at it and say we are not fiscally responsible. So that has an effect on our credit rating, and this is why California has consistently had one of the worst credit ratings in the nation. And we want to improve that, because every time that you have an improvement of credit rating, you save hundreds of millions of dollars on interest that you're paying. So this is why this is very important. Here we have a chart that shows to you, I want to turn this a little bit so you can also see it over here. Here we have a chart that shows to you that if we do not have a budget reform, this is how it will continue going out of control, and here are the revenues. Each of these lines, each of these numbers, it represents here a year, which means approximately a $10 billion deficit. So the reason why I want to show you that is because there's some people that make suggestions that we should go and increase taxes. But now imagine that every time we have a bump like this, like we've seen earlier here, every time we have a bump like this, or like this, which is, like I said, every 4 or 5 years, we would increase taxes to solve the problem. I don't think anyone in California will be happy that every time we cannot manage our finances and manage our budget, we increase taxes. You cannot tax your way out of this problem. You cannot tax your way out of the problem because, as you can see, it's $10 billion every year. What I want to do is, instead of raising taxes, I want to raise people's hopes. I want to raise people's aspirations, their dreams, and get them going and give money back to the people of California like we have done when I've come into office. We have reformed workers' compensation. That has reduced the workers' comp costs by 63%. That give back to the private sector $14 billion. Then we got and rescinded the car tax. Remember, the previous administration increased the car tax because they ran out of money. This is the first thing they do is when they run out of money. Sacramento immediately grabs your money as if it's your fault that we cannot get our act together in Sacramento. It's not your fault. You expect Sacramento to go and manage the money the right way. So what we did was we rescinded the car tax, and that saves California taxpayers $4 to $6 billion since 2003, since I came into office to now. Now think about that. That's together. Now it's $6 billion. Then it was $4 billion. That's $20 billion. So you add the $14 billion that California has saved in workers' comp and the $20 billion that you have saved with the car tax. That's $34 billion we gave back the state of California rather than collecting money from you, since you're already in a category of high-paying tax. I mean, California is one of the top when it comes to paying taxes. So therefore, we shouldn't go back to you to ask you for more tax money. So this is what we want to do, is give the money back to the people rather than collecting money. Now, we have done certain things through Proposition 58 and other propositions where we've tightened the noose. Because in the old days, what happened was, before I came into office, whenever they ran out of money, they started grabbing and stealing money from everywhere else. Sacramento went after local government. They grabbed money from local government, $1.3 to $1.5 billion each time. Then they grabbed money from transportation, another $1.4 billion. Then they go and grab money from pensions, and then they borrowed money for ongoing programs, and on and on and on. But with Proposition 58, which the people voted for in the spring of 2004, we eliminated that. Through Proposition 58, we cannot borrow for ongoing programs anymore. And through Proposition 1A, which people voted on just 2 years ago, we protected local government, so now local government cannot be, again, ripped off. And then to Proposition 42, transportation now cannot be ripped off anymore because that protects transportation. So what we wanted to do is take away all the possibilities where the state can go and grab money when they run out of money up there. So now the noose is tightened, and now they have no other option but to go and fix the system, because we can borrow, we cannot steal any more money, we can do none of those things anymore. So now we have to go and live within our means. And I wanted to get the state to that point so that we are forced to fix the budget system once and for all. So as you can see again here, we have no problem with the revenues, because as you can see, our revenues consistently keep going up. It's not like they're going down, they're consistently going up, except it goes like this. So what we have to do is get a straight line, get discipline going, and the way we're going to do that is by having a rainy day fund put aside. And this is what there's two things that I recommend here, how we fix the budget problem. So when we have a steep incline, like we had in 1999, where we had an increase of our revenues by 23%, let's not spend this whole 23% increase, because it's not going to be forever. Let us take some of that money off and put it in the rainy day fund. So when we have a decline of revenues, a flattening out of revenues, we now can supplement the revenues with the rainy day fund. And all of a sudden now we don't have to suspend Proposition 98. We don't have to take money away from the schools or from the elderly folks or from anyone else. We just keep going up with our spending and with our revenues. And the second thing is that I've recommended is that the legislators, rather than debating over what should we cut if we run out of money, they should predetermine that. They should sit down when things are going well, sit down, let's decide. If we have a downturn in our economy or with revenues, then we should go and decide ahead of time. Here are the 4 or 5 programs that we cut first. Then here's the next layer of programs that we cut, which is the Arkansas model, and other states are using that same model. In California, what we do is whenever we have a problem, that's when we start sitting down. And that's when we start fighting over the budget. And sometimes that fight goes on for 3 months. Now, when they do this kind of debate over the budget for 3 months, there's nothing else that gets done. Now, imagine, for 3 months, nothing else gets done. Now, I've seen that last summer when they debated over and they held up the budget for 2 months beyond of what they should have done. And what happened was this whole 3 months, the whole summer, nothing got done, because it was all about the budget. The reason why nothing else gets done is because as soon as you introduce something else during that time, then it becomes trading, like horse trading. Okay, you can help me with the budget here, then I help you with this. We don't want to do that. So this is why it's unnecessary 3 months that are wasted, that we could be talking about education reform or healthcare reform or about the environment or about infrastructure and rebuilding California. All of those important things we could do. But instead, we're wasting 3 months on a budget. So that's why I said, let us sit down now and let us talk about this. What do we cut in the case this happens again? So there's 3 things that we have to do now with the challenges that the legislators have under this fiscal emergency. A, they have to go and make mid-year cuts, which means this year before June 30th. This is why they have now 45 days. As a matter of fact, they have 38 days left, really. Then they have to make those kind of cuts that I have recommended. Or they maybe change some of those things, but definitely to make the cuts this mid-year. The second challenge they have is to go and start making the cuts in the next fiscal year, which starts on July 1 until next year. So they have to, again, go into that within this next few months and do that, and be disciplined about it. And the third thing they have to do is fix the budget system itself, the one that I'm recommending with this Arkansas model, and we're putting rainy day fund aside. Those are the kind of things that we have to do. Now, to me, I think we have a good shot to get this done this year. And the reason I'm saying it is because I'm impressed of how well the legislators have worked together. When I went to Sacramento, one of the biggest problems was in 2003 that Democrats and Republicans despised each other. They just couldn't get together and couldn't get anything done. And then I came up there and I knew that the most important challenge that I have is to bring Democrats and Republicans together. Now, I felt very strongly that I can do that because I sleep with a Democrat every night. So it shouldn't be that difficult to figure out how to get Democrats and Republicans together. If I can get together so intimately with a Democrat, I'm sure that other Republicans can find a way also to do the same thing. So we got them together. It took a while. There were fights and there were arguments and all those things. But we figured out a way how to do that. And now people work together much better. That doesn't mean that the philosophy changed of the Republicans or the philosophy changed of the Democrats. But it's just, we made it clear that the only way that you can really create action for the people of California is by compromising and meeting in the middle. Because if you're extreme to the right, the extreme left will never agree. So you got to come together in the center. And it's like President Eisenhower always said. He said, that the politics is kind of like a road. It's drivable in the middle, and on the right and on the left is the gutter. And he's absolutely correct with that. There's no action out the left and right. The action is in the middle. That's where the action is. And we have seen it now with all the things that we have accomplished in Sacramento. It is because people were willing to move to the center. And it's not easy. It's always a struggle. But I always say to the legislators up there, what is important for us to know is that we are public servants, not party servants. There's two different things. When you elect someone, you don't elect them because you want them to serve the party. You want to have them serve the people of California. That's our ultimate objective, to make life for people of California better, to always improve the life of the people and to improve our infrastructure, the roads, to make it easier to do business, and all of this to make education better and so on. So this is what we have to strive for. So I have great hopes that this year they will get together. All of the four leaders. I've just had a Big Five meeting, which means that the governor gets together with the four legislative leaders, Assembly and Senate, Democrats and Republicans. And I've gotten a really good positive feedback after my budget presentation, that they know there's a problem. They agree with the kind of problem that we have. They may have different ways of making cuts. They maybe prefer to cut a little bit more in this area and less in education and all of those things. So there will be changes there, but that's all good, because remember, we have 120 very talented legislators in the Capitol. It's not just what I say should count. It's what we all say together that's what counts. So I said that I will be very open-minded about the discussions, very open-minded and inclusive about bringing everyone in, listening to their suggestions. The important thing on the end is that we don't get stuck with the deficit, that we balance our budget the right way, and that we find a way to fix the system so for future governors and for future legislators don't have to go through this mess every single time when we have a downturn in our economy. Now, when I talk about the downturn in our economy, let me just explain to you. It's the housing market we're talking about, not the whole economy. It's the housing market that we're talking about here and the subprime mortgage crisis that we have. That has a spillover effect on other areas. That's why we have seen this morning when the unemployment rate came out is 6.1%. Even though we are creating more jobs today than we have ever created, we have now created, since I've come into office, over 1 million jobs. But now, because the economy is softening, they have a problem that more and more people need jobs. So they go out and try to get jobs. People that have their own business, they're independent, and they try to run a little business. They maybe fail, and now they go out and go to work again. So you have an increase in demand of jobs, even though we create more jobs. It's an odd way of the way to do the accounting. But the economy as a whole in California is going really well in a lot of other areas. And what we are going to do is, in order to supplement the loss of jobs because of the housing market and of construction, we now have gotten together again in this last Big Five meeting, and we've talked about that the people of California have approved $37 billion of infrastructure bonds, including $5 billion on water bonds. We are going to take that money, instead of spending it over a period of 10 years, we're going to speed up the projects. So we're going to pump more money into the projects, into the construction, and we're going to get going with projects much faster. So we are working on that also right now, because that means that more people then will get jobs. All of those people that are laid off in the private sector and building homes can then get jobs in the public sector and in public constructions through public-private partnerships and so on. So there's a lot of activities going on in Sacramento where we talk about how do we go and help people while we are going through this bumpy road. It's only a temporary bump, but nevertheless, it's a bump, and we want to help people. So with that, I want to just open it up to questions that you may have about the budget or about any of the other things that I have said, and I hope that you feel free to ask as many questions as you want until someone will cut us off, because that's what happens always. There's one point someone stands up and says, all right, this is the last question now, we're running out of time. Governor, you've got to move on to the next appointment. And so that's how I get bossed around. I feel like I'm at home with my wife. But anyway, okay, go ahead.
Governor, we've heard about the workforce development budget that you've provided to be able to stimulate and get work developed. We've heard about hard hats for the veterans, the work for the veterans. We've heard about the hiring center from the Navy League. Can you speak to the issue when you're talking about accelerating these, how any of these activities may help any of the veterans?
Well, as you know, that veterans, when we did the kind of program where veterans become construction workers, for instance, there's some great programs in that area. It will help them a lot, because what happens is a lot of them have been put out of work now because there are not that many homes being built right now. Until all the rest of the homes are being sold, which I think will take another year because the prices were too high. Now the prices are coming down. Now they will get rid of those homes within the next year. But in the meantime, I think we should put all of them to work. There should no one be unemployed. So it would take a little bit of ramp-up time. We are pumping a lot of funds already into infrastructure projects. $8 billion out of the $37 billion is already pumped in there. But we're going to pump an extra few $billion into even speed it up more and to put everyone to work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Janet Wolf, 2nd District Supervisor in Santa Barbara, and I sat next to you when you signed our emergency declaration during the Zaka fire. And I wanted to thank you for coming down on short notice and doing that for the citizens of the county.
My pleasure.
Thank you for that. My question to you has to do with a budgetary solution where you've suggested delaying some cash payments to the counties as it relates to Medi-Cal reimbursement. And there's been some timelines suggested, from 2 months to 6 months to a year. My question is, what guarantees does the county have, or the counties have, in indeed receiving that money as it's planned?
Well, first of all, I think, Mike, that you maybe want to address this. We have our finance director here, Mike Ginesse. Let's give him a big hand because he's the one that is struggling.
Sure. There are, as you probably also know, some rate reductions as part of the 10% across the board, but that's it. We're not proposing to not make those payments. We're proposing to delay a few payments. We have a really big cash problem in the state right now, or we will have one in the summer. So one of the things we're trying to do in the budget is put some payments beyond that cash problem. There are some months like July and August where we spend a lot, but the revenue doesn't come in. And in September and October, the revenue comes in a little faster and the spending goes down. So we just need to bridge those couple of months. And we're not taking that money away. We're just holding it off for a while.
I'm sure that made you feel good, huh? No, I think it's very important of what Mike said, because we don't believe in taking any money away from local government ever again. That should not happen. Okay. Yes. Yeah, I think there's several mayors here. I just want to say thank you very much, whoever the mayors are here. And thank you here they are. Okay, so thank you very much for being here today. We love local government and the mayors that are such important partners in our whole work. The state is all, the cities and the counties all together make up this great state. So Sacramento sometimes think that's where the action is. No, the action is on the local level. You create the action, and we are supposed to be the facilitators to make things easier for you guys. Go ahead.
Governor, is it working?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Guadalupe, my name is Lupe Alvarez, and I know you just mentioned about small cities, local governments. We have a small budget, $3 million. Every single dollar is important to us. Is there anything in your budget that will hurt my city, whether it be police or fire services?
There is some law enforcement payments, not right now, but I mean, there will be down the line next year, will be some law enforcement, some cutback, because like I said, we cut 10% across the board. But I don't think it should have an effect on local government. It's just that they have to just budget a little bit differently. But we're not taking anything away from the cities. That's not what we're planning to do. Okay, sure. Yes. Oh, here, okay.
Governor, I'm the chairman of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors, and my colleagues are here, and I just want to welcome you and appreciate your positive message. I don't envy your position, and us in county government fret what the impacts are going to be from the state's deficit on local government. But I sure hope that, I heard you were taking a 10% cut across the board. And I know you're going to continue to have discussions with the legislature to find out if indeed there's an alternative to across-the-board cut. But I would just encourage you to give some thought to lessening the impact on the most vulnerable citizens that we serve in terms of the revenues that come to us that will go to serve those citizens. Obviously, there's always some services that are more important than others. And I just, wish you best of luck in your quest here and urge you to give that some consideration.
Well, thank you very much. And let me just tell you, the problem is, as you know, that the way it works with the budget is, and I think it's really interesting, that there's 3 areas where all or most of the money gets sucked up. And that is healthcare, that's education, and it's prisons. So between those things, no matter where you cut, it is horrible. There's no, I mean, because even though you maybe when you cut in prisons, you say, okay, we cut in prisons, but that's okay. But it's not. Because we have to be very careful that we don't ever let anyone out that is a sex offender, that is a dangerous criminal, or has committed a violent crime. We want to make sure that as we go through this process, that we're very careful that we don't really create a higher risk for the people of California. So this is why I say every single one of those categories, we have to be very careful how we go about it, and we have to be very surgical in how to go about so we don't hurt people by doing that. There's already a pain being felt when you cut 10% across the board. But how do you lessen that in the best possible way? And this is why, even in education, even though there will be a 10% cut, but we have to go in there and find a way that the money still stays in the classroom and that we can get as much money to the kids and into the classroom as possible, and maybe cut other things that maybe are not as important as the classroom is. So we have to be very careful in all of those things, if it's in healthcare and health cuts in all of those areas all across the board. So I hear your concern, and believe me, I despise having to make those cuts, because knowing that it is the fault of Sacramento, and knowing that if they would have had a budget system in place 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 5 years ago, or if they just would have passed our budget proposals that we had, the 2 that I talked about, we wouldn't have this problem right now. Because like I said, there's no reason to make cuts, because we have continuous increases in revenues. But when we have those spikes, then it goes down again. Instead of keeping some of that money, everyone wants to grab that money. How could you dare not take that money? Education needs it, healthcare needs it, this needs it, that. And they grab it, and they take it, and they use it. And it's all gone. And then they are in this, what I call in my state of the state, the sugar high. Where everyone is excited, and Democrats and Republicans, and they're hugging each other, and they're kissing each other, and they say, isn't it a great year, and how we got along, how well we did. And then comes the next year, and they cannot keep their promise. They now have promised everyone this high spending, but they can't keep the promise. That's the problem in politics. People promise things they can't keep. It's much better to be fiscally responsible so we don't have to go through this. That's why I say it's so important that that it's a lesson for them. So when I talk about this will rattle the cage, that's exactly what I mean, is let them know that this is a serious crisis and a serious problem that we have. So they should wake everyone up and say, We got to fix the system so this will never happen again. That's what I want to accomplish this year. Yes, please.
Governor, my name's John Wilczak. I'm sorry about my voice, but I'm an entrepreneur here in Santa Barbara County. And in companies I've built, at times we face similar problems. I've had 30 employees and revenue's not where it needs to be. And I've gone to my employees and said, we have two options. Everybody's taking a salary cut. We're going to lay off 6 people. What would you like to do? And almost universally they said, let's take the salary cuts. The state of California is one of the best paid public employee states in the United States. And I see no will on the part of the government to say to our employees, it's time to slow down the growth of the government salaries and the government benefits to aid this problem. They are a substantial piece of this problem. I'd like to know what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I agree that it would ideally it would be that if people could also take maybe a salary cut, but that's not what's going to happen because these are all contracts that were negotiated. So what we have to do is we have to go to the Department of Health and Human Services and say, you have to make a 10% cut. You decide how you're going to do that. And then they make the decision. We go to the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and say, you got to make a 10% cut. And we go to each one of the departments, including our office. I said to my chief of staff, we're going to make a 10% cut in my office. And I also ask the legislators, do a 10% cut up there upstairs in the Capitol. All across the board, 10%. Because that's what we have to do in order to meet our needs and in order to balance the budget. But you see, in the private sector, as you know, it's a little easier. When I have an office, I have a few people working in Santa Monica at this office, and not the governor's office I'm talking about now, just my personal office. So if I would have that problem, it's easy for me to go to them and to say, do you want to take a cut? Not that I ever get into that situation because I made big movies, so I never have to worry about that. But I assume for a second that's the problem that I would have. That's what I would do. The same with you. I would just say, hey, why don't we all take a 10% cut in the salary? This way no one has to be laid off. We don't have to take any kind of benefits away from you or anything like that. But in government, it's a whole different ballgame. You cannot lay off people that easy. As a matter of fact, Mike, why don't you come out and just explain quickly of why it is hard to make immediately cuts? We are right now spending $400 to $600 million a month more than we are taking in, and why we cannot go in and make immediate cuts that will have an immediate effect. You maybe want to explain this quickly. Yeah.
Well, for example, on layoffs, it takes us 9 months to get a layoff done. Now, a few people may leave during that 9 months, but for the most part, it takes us 9 months. So we're going to be doing layoffs in many of our departments, and we're implementing those processes now to try to be ready, but still it won't be ready for a good part of next year. We won't have those savings. In healthcare is another great example. If we want to reduce healthcare, we first have to pass the law because everything in healthcare is tied down by law. But then even with the law passed, you still have to run regulations and notify people that things are going to change, reprogram computers, notify the workers to do things differently. And even then, once you finally got the services eliminated or reduced or the rates cut or whatever it is, in the health programs, we budget that in cash. So we don't really see the savings come in the form of lower bills until the next fiscal year. And that's when they count. So it is, as the governor says,
also with prisons. Explain with prisons.
Well, right. In prisons, I guarantee you wouldn't want us to just let out a bunch of people and say, okay, we've saved some money. We got to figure out who those people are. We got to make sure we check their records and all that. And even then, when there are fewer people in the prison, it's going to take us a while to reduce down the workforce. Almost all the money in state prisons is for prison guards and healthcare and employees of the prisons. So to get those workforces down is a long process under state law, and that's just what we're saddled with. It's harder in the state government to do things quickly.
That's right. Yes, please.
I'm Patty DeDominic. We spoke before you took office, and thank you for your leadership on trying to prevent another fiscal crisis in California, also for saving us over $20 billion in workers' comp. you saved probably 97% of all California's businesses from having to hire bankruptcy lawyers just in the nick of time. There's some more systems in California that are broken, and I know you know what many of them are. You've done a great job at reforming workers' comp. There's still a few more $1 billion in there. And the next organization you can just go in and fix is the California Insurance Guarantee Association. They're totally impotent, and they're working to cut jobs wherever they can. I mean, they're working to destroy businesses wherever they can. They're suing the insurance companies, and they're suing the insureds, and they're suing our customers. So if we could do those two things, clean up and continue the reforms in workers' comp, stop SEGA from working opposite its mission, and then stop government agencies from suing each other and make them mediate, I think you could take another $7 to $10 billion a year of waste out of our government.
Well, first of all, let me just tell you, I welcome this kind of recommendations. If we can get you a card, because what I would love to do is I want to get you a card, if you can collect that. And I'm going to have Insurance Commissioner Poizner call you, because that's exactly what he's looking for, is input from the outside. He's one of those guys that likes to get input from the outside, because a lot of times when you're in Sacramento, you don't always see. That's why I travel up and down the state, because I want to hear that. I want to hear each one's, things that are very important to us, because that's how we learn. Because like I said, the action is not in Sacramento. The action is on the local level. And remember that a lot of great ideas comes from the grassroots level. We got to go and reach out and get people's input. So we would you will have by Monday, I guarantee you latest, you will have a phone call from Steve Poizner himself, okay? Thank you, absolutely. Thank you, yes.
The governor will...
Just one more.
One more question, please.
You see, what did I tell you? Someone is going to get up and says, okay, this is the last question. I knew it. I get bossed around by a woman at home and bossed around here by a woman. I can't believe it. And I was just, go ahead.
Governor, thank you for being here. And my name is Dick DeWeese. I'm mayor of the city of Lompoc, which is just about an hour up the road here. And I want to commend you on your efforts and wish you well in dealing with the legislator up there. And you mentioned earlier that you and your wife were going to be spending the weekend in Santa Barbara. I would like to encourage you to come up to Lompoc, where I'll be glad to get you a great glass of local wine. And then we'll go on a tour of Mission, the La Prisma State Historic Park. And I guarantee once you go through that tour, you're going to change your mind and not close that park, Governor.
Okay, thank you. I like that. I like that. Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to just say one more thing, and that is, what is most important here is that the people of California are my partners. This is why we have accomplished all of the things we have accomplished, is because the help of the people. You elected me. You put me in office. You helped me with the various different initiatives. You re-elected me. You had faith in me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been re-elected. And so what I'm basically doing is I want to ask you just to help me get this budget fixed. And you say to yourself, well, how can I help the governor? Your voice is powerful. You don't recognize. When you call the legislators, when you call Sacramento, when you send them an email, when you let your voice be heard, it is very powerful. Call up there and tell them, we want to fix this time. You're on a hook. We want to get this done. The mid-year cuts, the cuts for next year, don't raise our taxes, and fix the budget system. Get that message across in Sacramento. Thank you very much. Thank you.